You are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For the first time in the history of this podcast, I interviewed two guests at the same time. I had the opportunity to interview Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson. Brian and Jeffrey are the two authors who formed the Andrews and Wilson duo of authors, and they have written many fiction novels. Most notably, they've written books continuing the Jack Ryan series started by the late Tom Clancy, and they've also written books for the estate of the late W.E.B. Griffin. Additionally, they've written books in the Tier 1 and Sons of Valor series, as well as the Shepards Series. Both Brian and Jeffrey have served in the United States Navy. I'm here with Jeffrey Wilson and Brian Andrews, who formed the writing duo Andrews and Wilson. Jeffrey and Brian, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us. We're looking forward to chatting with you.
Jeffrey, I'll start with you. Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, I'm Jeff Wilson. Since I'm going first, I'll tell you I'm the most important, most attractive, most intelligent half of the Andrews and Wilson brand.
He can only say that because there's no video.
Right. So I'm a Navy veteran. We both are. I served as a combat surgeon with Naval Special Warfare and then with a Joint Counterterror Task Force later. And been a writer my whole life. And I have the unique blessing that is doing something I love every day and doing it with my best friend in the world. So I'm living the perfect life.
Brian, feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hey, my name is Brian Andrews. I'm the other half of Andrews and Wilson. And I can't remember what Jeff said he did, but I'm the one that does all the work. Did you say that you did all the work? I think he said he was the good-looking, smart half. So then I'll just take the other half, the half that does all of the work. But yeah, I mean, the coolest thing about our job is that we get to do it, number one, together. That, you know, we've now produced over 20 novels, and we've had a great time doing it. Every single book is different. Every single book is a journey for us, and we have a lot of fun. In fact, right before this podcast, we were on the phone just talking strategy and plot on the book that we're working on right now, which is Tier 1, Book 8. The working title is Ember. And so for those of you that are unfamiliar with our work out there, the Tier 1 series is really our main tentpole franchise, and it's a military thriller series.
Brian, I'll stick with you. How much of an honor is it for you and Jeffrey to be asked to continue the Jack Ryan series of books, which the series was started by the late Tom Clancy, as well as write books for the W.E.B. Griffin estate?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's such an honor. And, you know, the funny thing about this is, you know, I was a submarine officer, and I remember distinctly reading The Hunt for Red October while I was out deployed on a fast attack submarine doing the types of things that Tom Clancy was writing about, chasing Russian submarines around. I mean, we didn't chase the, quote, Red October, but there were Russian submarines out there, and I was on a fast attack Los Angeles class submarine doing some of the exact stuff that was in that book. And so now, you know, fast forward 30 years later, I get to write, like Jeff said, with my best friend, I get to write the next installment is going to come out on the 40th anniversary of Hunt for Red October. So you've got this sort of really interesting full circle curveball that the universe threw at us to be able to write a book from a guy that, you know, inspired us not only to serve, but to write books in the first place.
I'm going to go to Jeffrey now. You and Brian's work have also included the Shepards Series, Tier 1, which Brian made a reference to the next book in that series, and the Sons of Valor series of novels. Without spoiling too much each of those three series, what are each of the series about?
Yeah, so first of all, the one theme that we pull through all of our series is we try very hard to honor the men and women that we had the privilege of serving with. And so all of our books tend to have a covert ops or military spin, or at least characters from that space. And so that's something all the series have in common. Tier 1, like Brian said, that's our we call it our tentpole series because it's how we got launched. And actually, Brian, we're creeping up on 30 novels, by the way, at this point. But so that series of books, we're writing the 8th book right now. And the premise of that series is pretty straightforward. The entire Tier 1 Navy SEAL team gets wiped out in a horrible attack because of leaked intelligence. And the lone survivor is allowed to be buried beside his teammates in Arlington, assume a new identity, become John Dempsey, which is our main character, and hunt down the people responsible and eventually become the leader of one of the most secret and lethal covert operations teams in the world. Sons of Valor is fun for us because it's actually a shared universe series. In Sons of Valor, we have answered the question, if what happened in book 1 of Tier 1 were to happen in real life, what would they do? Well, they'd eventually stand up a Tier 1 SEAL team again. And so in Sons of Valor, we're going to be writing the 4th book in that series soon, but the 3rd one comes out in just a few weeks, Sons of Valor 3 War Machine. In that series, we have a newly reconstituted Tier 1 SEAL team. And the question we ask there is, what would that be like? Having to start from scratch with no background and experience because everybody has been wiped out and tackle the new threats. And the threat of those books is more, what is it like for the new generation? You know, we realized as we were writing that book that there are Navy SEALs, that there are special operators and infantrymen and pilots who either weren't born or were babies when 9/11 happened, that's not part of their life experience. So what is it like for them on both the good guy and the bad guy side? You know, the bad guys of that series, they're become more sophisticated, more educated. It's not sheep herders in the Hindu Kush anymore. And so that's what we tackle there. Brian, you want to tell them about Shepards?
Yeah, the Shepards series is almost an experimental series when it started, in the sense that, you know, we were approached by the world's largest Christian publisher, Tyndale House, to try to generate a series that would get male readers engaged. You know, this is a company that has a very robust female readership, but they're trying to figure out, how do we get men to read Christian fiction? Because they don't want to pick up the Amish romance, right? So, you know, what our charter was is to come up with something that would really engage male readers, bring them back into the fold. And they saw that we were doing special operations and military thriller books with good success, and that we had a good readership. They're like, oh, maybe we can carry that over. And so what we did was, the Shepards series takes that covert operations element that our fans love, that's an Andrews and Wilson trademark, but we incorporated a faith-based spiritual warfare element. And that's the speculative component, is this idea of, you know, spiritual warfare. And so if I had to come up with a hook, I would say, you know, what if, you know, evil actually sort of operated in the background using bad guys with modern tactics? How would you fight bad guys with modern tactics and intelligence that are working for evil forces? Well, what you would need to do is stand up a special unit, which is the Shepards, and they would act like a modern covert ops direct action team, but they would be powered by intelligence collected from spiritual warfare.
I'm not exactly sure which of you would be better equipped to answer this question, but what publishing companies have you as a duo used to publish your books?
Yeah, that's so we've actually had a fairly diverse experience, eclectic experience in publishing. We started out the Tier 1 series, for example, with an APUB, Thomas and Mercer, so a traditional publishing house, but owned by Amazon. So we've been in that Amazon space. We've been with Penguin Random House, obviously, for Clancy and for Griffin. We have most of our titles at Blackstone. The Shepards launched at Tyndale House, of course, because it's a Christian series. I will say we're going to give a shout out here. Blackstone is an incredible publisher. We've had a great experience with all of our publishing houses. Blackstone is probably the most creative and progressive and outside the box thinking house we've ever worked with. So it's been a joy. But we've learned different things from each of them. We also have done a little bit of independent publishing. We have a novella out in the Tier 1 series that we released, and some other works that we've done individually in that space. So we do feel we've done a good job of educating ourselves. But in the end, we think diversity is key in this business. If you can be represented in different spaces of publishing, just like you want to be represented in different spaces of storytelling, then your likelihood of success goes up, we think exponentially. So that's why we write some, we now write some speculative things, some sci-fi, grounded, technology-based sci-fi and techno thrillers with The Sandbox and a novel we have coming out in the spring called 4 Minutes. So we're trying to diversify across storytelling, but also across publishing models as well.
Next question will go to Brian. What is it like for you and Jeffrey to take your brand of storytelling to film and television?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're really excited about entering the film and television space because, one thing you do realize as an author is that not everybody reads, right? And so, we want to have our brand of storytelling available in all other channels. And it's really kind of, they talk about the golden age of Hollywood, being back in the 1900s. I think maybe we're at the golden age of Hollywood, renewed here, because with all the streaming platforms, there's so many more channels now available to get film and television projects made and in front of people. And so, and a lot of very, very creative, highly motivated individuals at all these different studios. And so what we found is that, not just Sons of Valor, Tier 1, Shepards, those aren't our only opportunities. We've been creating some original content, speculative stuff, new characters, things that we don't even have in print right now. And those are projects that we've been developing. So right now we have close to a dozen projects under development, film and television. Some are slotted to be streaming series, some are under development to be features, but all of them at least sort of incorporate the ethos of military characters, mission before self, and science and technology, and that sort of incorporates our brand.
I'll pose the next question to Jeffrey. You and Brian's books are works of fiction that are meant to entertain, but what do you hope readers learn about those who serve in the U.S. Armed Forces and their families by reading the books that you and Brian write?
Well, we really appreciate that question, seriously, because that is a huge part of our brand, but also just our personal ethos. We set out with every single book to honor the people that we've served with, to honor the people that we've lost, and to honor the people that are out there today at the pointy tip of the spear, keeping us all safe. And so what we do is, rather than focusing on the technology or the type of gun or this or that or the other, we really hope that people will identify with the characters. So it's a little unusual to have highly character-driven stories in the thriller genre to the level that we do. But the reason that we do that is we hope people will come away with a better understanding of the impact and sacrifice required to serve at that level, the impact that it has on individuals, on their relationships in their teams, and their relationships with their loved ones at home. And oftentimes in our books, we strive to also show that human element of the families that are left behind when the ultimate sacrifice is made, or even just that worry of having a loved one downrange in harm's way. So that's what we hope that people will take away from the fiction, is that, yeah, it's fiction and it definitely meant to entertain 100%, but we do want them to gain an appreciation of what is going on in the real world, because it is meant to reflect that.
Brian, I'm going to give you the final question without giving away any classified or top secret information, because that's an obvious no-no. Mm-hmm. How is artificial intelligence affecting covert operations in the battlefield space in warfare?
One of the things we talk about in our novels, and just when we're dialoguing with people who are still in active duty, right out there on the pointy tip of the spear, we like to say, is just this idea of how kinetic warfare is and the speed of war. As we incorporate technology, drones, and data processing, the speed of war is accelerating to the point where we might enter this new territory where things are simply happening too fast for a human being to be able to process all the information and make decisions. And so artificial intelligence is not only accelerating us towards that point, but it might also become the solution. And so that is a brave new world that we're going to enter. And I think there's a lot of consternation in the upper echelon of the defense community, trying to think about how do we use artificial intelligence to help us manage the battlefield and all the information coming in, but not cede control to artificial intelligence. Jeff, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate it. That's the part that's the balance, like Brian is saying. We want it to work for us, right? Not the other way around. And I'm not talking like Terminator, end of the world stuff here. Not that there aren't some fears about that, but I'm just talking about in a more modern day applicable type situation. Do we want to give up the kill order control? For example, if you've got an armed drone and artificial intelligence is helping it rapidly process information, you could make an argument that it can process that information so rapidly that properly programmed, it can make a kill, no kill decision on its own. But do we want that? Do we want to remove the human element, the elements of compassion, of empathy from the equation when those decisions are made? I would argue no. And so that's the trade-off, right? We want to use the artificial intelligence as a tool, not become a servant to the artificial intelligence or cede our human control over important decisions. And so I think that's the balance that we're looking for in the military.
Jeffrey and Brian, both of you were wonderful guests for this podcast. This was my first time interviewing two guests at the same time, and it was a wonderful experience. I thank you both for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
The pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you did a great job. Handled two people, no problem.
I was nervous at first interviewing two guests at once, but it was a wonderful interview, and Brian and Jeffrey were both wonderful guests. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACscribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.